Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborn. I'm very excited about today's show because we are going to be talking about uncorking new ways to become a sustainable wine lover. And we're going to be tasting through 3 wines from 3 wineries who are leaders in sustainability and to all find that using 100% cork is integral to that mission. If you purchase the wines ahead of time from Wine.com, fantastic. Please go ahead, get those open, pour them into some glassware. If you don't have the wines, not a problem. The trio is still available on Wine.com, and you can always revisit this video, which will live on the Wine.com YouTube channel, which if you have not already, I encourage you to subscribe to. These are the 3 wines we are tasting in order: the Groth Sauvignon Blanc, the Willamette Valley Vineyards Estate Pinot Noir, and the Ridge Lytton Springs. So I want to start by giving an introduction, kind of brief introduction to cork, because this tasting is about being a sustainable wine consumer, but also how cork plays a role in that. Feel free to go ahead and start tasting some of these wines while I talk. It's always more enjoyable to talk about wine and be sipping it at the same time. So cork, it's made from the bark of the cork oak tree. These trees are primarily found in Portugal. So cork trees and cork harvesting are really interesting because when cork is harvested, it's done entirely by hand, and the tree is not cut down or harmed in any way. In fact, the harvesting process actually improves the life cycle of the cork tree. The bark grows back, and it can be harvested again every 9 to 12-ish years for about 200 years, the whole life cycle of that tree, as you can see here. So not only is it really economically sound to preserve the tree, but it also helps prevent deforestation. So yeah, it's kind of this continuous part. And not only that, but cork and cork trees absorb carbon dioxide, like a lot of carbon dioxide. A cork tree during its life cycle can absorb 20 tons of CO2 in the atmosphere, while at the same time producing about 65,000 corks. So even the cork in your wine, after it's already become a stopper, still absorbing that CO2. And then, not to mention, as a natural product, cork can be recycled. Think of cork boards, both the ones you make and bulletin boards, floors. It can be made into even shoes. And should you not be able to recycle it, it's part of the earth, so it's compostable. It does not go into a landfill. So yeah, cork is pretty sustainable. And just a quick note for those who might think of cork taint, TCA, and wonder about that. There has been so much progress. It makes me so happy that the focus kind of shifted towards understanding and improving the quality control kind of at every point, from the harvesting to the production process, to just ensure that TCA cannot form as it goes through. So there's so much being done to ensure top quality, which is fantastic. So let's introduce our guests, who are going to be talking a little bit about their sustainability practices, as well as using 100% cork. From Groth Vineyards and Winery, we have President and CEO Suzanne Groth. Joining us from Willamette Valley Vineyards, founder and CEO Jim Bernot. And from Ridge, we have head winemaker and CEO John Olney. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for being here. Hello, do we have everyone? Okay, we're getting everyone.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So not only are you all just leaders in the wine industry as a whole, you're also leaders in sustainability in wine, which continues to kind of really move to the forefront as we as wine consumers all are trying to make better choices to kind of preserve and respect the environment. We all want to still be enjoying your wines and all wines in about 50 years. So there's a lot we need to kind of focus on there. So I'm going to come to each of you to talk about your wines and the sustainable choices you're each taking. Suzanne, we're going to start with you with Groth Wines and the Sauvignon Blanc. First, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hi, Gwendolyn. Thanks so much for having me. Wow. Yes. Yeah. So
let me start with one quick question. So Groth, well, first I want to get people situated, right? So Groth is located in the heart of Napa Valley.
Thank
you. You have estates in Oakville and Yountville.
Correct.
And you're certified Napa Green fish friendly farming. So tell us first kind of what that represents.
Yeah, what does that mean? Why are we, I think, we were joking about this earlier. We're talking about wine. Why are we also talking about fish? Well, everything downstream of us is represented by that fish. So Napa Valley is one watershed. Everywhere you're growing and farming, you are feeding into that watershed. So it's really important that we protect it, including our fish. Obviously, we have a major fluvial artery through Napa Valley, the Napa River, and it feeds into the bay. So everything we do goes downstream from here. And every ounce of water we remove from the ground, right? And then when we're using that in winemaking, we have one of our sustainable efforts in the last 2 years is to add a MBBR, basically it's a water recycling unit. This allows us to take all of the water in our winemaking and recycle up to 90% of it. It's that small building just to the left of our winery there in Oakville, right smack in the middle of Napa Valley. And that water recycling, or MBBR as it's referred to, is a series of pools basically housing tiny single cell organisms that consume and digest the high acidity in our water and get it to a friendlier pH before it can go back into the ground. So essentially we're putting it back in the ground cleaner, then we're drawing it up from our underground aquifer here in Oakville. And then of course, our farming techniques, incredibly important, so that we are protecting everything that goes back into the ground, including banning glyphosate and any kind of chemical farming utility within our vineyard. It was very common in the 1970s as my parents were arriving in 1981. Those were very common techniques used in farming at the time. And of course, we don't use them anymore. And we've really turned to what I would call traditional farming techniques, old-fashioned farming techniques that were, part of our culture before petrochemicals became the easy button, right? The cheap and easy way to get rid of weeds, cheap and easy way to get rid of pests. Now we use all kinds of things, including, basically sexual aversion or confusion. To confuse a moth, we hang these little tags in the vineyard that are loaded with, basically a pheromone that confuses a male moth that can't find a female, then they can't mate. So instead of spraying for moths, we're utilizing techniques like that. Earlier you mentioned about, I want to drink these wines in 40, 50 years. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. And that is why we use cork. That's one of the reasons why we use cork. Now, our Sauvignon Blanc that you're going to taste today, our 2020 Sauvignon Blanc, Napa Valley appellated wine, we actually have chosen what is called a technical cork. I don't know if you guys can see this, but and you've pulled the cork, so you're seeing it. It's a conglomerate cork, like a champagne cork, and this is TCA free. So, the cork companies have gone, you talked about technology. Back in the 80s, we were using natural cork with our Sauvignon Blanc. It's incredibly sensitive. Just the acidity in the wine, the aromas in the wine are very sensitive to cork. We were having too high of a TCA problem, and we turned first to a synthetic cork, really a plastic cork.
Those never go back. They never go back in, which is fine.
And they never go back in the bottle, right? We hated it. I hated it. My mother and I were like picking up off aromas right as we would pull that plastic cork. So we basically said, no, this is not acceptable. And luckily, other technology has come to the forefront where we can. The cork companies basically
corrugated cork. Yes,
it's a technical cork. That's what they refer to it as. There's lots of companies that make these. Basically, they break down cork, natural cork, into tiny little pieces. They can steam, clean it, treat it, make sure that it's perfectly pristine. And then we don't have that TCA reaction with our very sensitive Sauvignon Blanc. Right. Now, we do use 100% natural cork in all of our products. I do make a much larger investment. This cork cost me, this is closer to 30 to 40 cents per bottle in cork. And this cork is for our reserve Cabernet, which I want people to age that 25, 30 years. So we have to invest a lot more in not just the length, the size, it's much larger, of course. There we go, cork envy. It's a 60 millimeter cork, very, it's crazy large, right? Getting it out of the bottle. If any of you buy a bottle of our reserve Cab, take that extra turn. It's going to take a second. Yeah. Long cork, but it's the high quality of this cork. And each one of these is verified TCA free. Basically, every single cork is tested. So that's what's driving the cost of that as well. But we believe in cork. I mean, my gosh, It can be recycled. Of course, we can use it in our Birkenstocks, which are so hot again, but we can also just, it can be recycled by putting it in a compost bin as opposed to getting it into the garbage.
You had mentioned that you usually throw it into the compost bin.
I do with my bottles when I'm recycling, but we do collect them and actually repurpose, recycle them here at the winery because we go through a lot of cork, right?
Yeah.
Right off our bottling line, we use a lot of cork. So we figured, we might as well just take the extra time to repurpose those and get that to a company that can use it.
Yeah, great. I mean, half of our decorations at our home are large vases filled with corks rather than flowers. It's just
absolutely. We all have
them
around.
So much with them, right? It's
right.
Fantastic. Well,
absolutely.
Well, let's taste through this Sauvignon Blanc, and this is coming from the Oakville or the
Right. We do have 44 acres of Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon on our estate here. We own 121 acres in Oakville, but we also buy some Sauvignon Blanc from some neighbors. So right here in Oakville, and then down to the Yountville area. So therefore, it becomes a Napa Valley appellated wine. The very small AVA of Oakville is only about 4% production of all of Napa Valley. And of course, Napa Valley is about 7% production for all of California. And we are the US's largest production state. I mean, I don't want to offend Oregon here. They're right there with us, right?
Yes.
The West Coast dominates USA wine production. How's that?
The Pacific Highway, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And our Sauvignon Blanc is aged in oak, French oak, but it must be inert. So we'll use these barrels in our Chardonnay program for 5-6 years. And we'll use them in the Sauvignon Blanc program for 10, 15 years. If you keep barrels hydrated, they're a fantastic vessel. But what we're after is that surly aging. So as the juice is sitting on the lees, the dead yeast cells for about 3 months, we're stirring it, exposing it, and kind of giving it a roundness in the mouthfeel. So the Semillon also adds a nice mid-palate feel. But we don't want the wine to be oaky because
what's the percentage of Semillon on this one?
It's 21% in this vintage. I have 11 acres of Semillon on my property here.
Okay, well, walk us through the tasting. Give us the aromas, the flavor profile.
Always looking for citrus, melon. These are the flavors we are farming for here in the warmer zones of Napa Valley. The cooler zones of Napa Valley, like Yountville, they give it a nice acidic punch, more that kiwi, a little bit of that gooseberry, but we don't want it to be that classic. New Zealand is the classic cold climate Sauvignon Blanc, right? Cappy, grassiness. They say grassy, I say cappy. Here in Napa, if you have cold climate Sauvignon Blanc, I think it tastes like cappy personally. But we're going for that melon, and maybe there is a little hint of that, gooseberry lime kind of note, just to kind of lift the palate. But that Semillon has this candle wax and roundness to the mouthfeel. It's a nice aroma. It doesn't have a lot of flavor, the Semillon. If you're tasting the grapes, they are kind of watery in nature, but that nice mouthfeel and waxy, as I like to say, just is right in there.
It's a beautiful wine. The complexity is just really stunning because there's two grapes and then the climate and just, there's just so many things exploding from the glass, and the balance on the mouthfeel, like you said, that kind of the bright acidity, but that roundness, that yin and yang are really pretty in there. So
thanks. My mother always
I don't have much left. So
my mom calls this wine Moorish. The more you drink, the more you want. Just goes down easy. It's not complicated. It's delicious. It's great with your Thai food or just kicking back on the patio.
Kicking back. I know. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Beautiful wine. Beautiful packaging as well. So we will be moving on to Oregon with the Willamette Valley Vineyards Estate Pinot Noir. Jim, hello, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So your winery is up in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. Very kind of easy to decipher that from your label, which is great. Talking, kind of diving into that whole sustainability, which Oregon does a lot of, but you're certified what we call live and salmon safe, and these are Oregon-based certifications. So just like Suzanne was saying, we were kind of talking about why do so many things have to do with fish when we're talking about wine, but tell us a little bit about these two certifications.
Gwendolyn, the story that Suzanne gave you about Napa is really very similar to what Oregon winemakers did. Back in 1999, we got together and we're committed to being as low impact as we possibly could be, making sure that whatever we did didn't end up in the groundwater and didn't contaminate the soil, and also produced a very healthy outcome for the consumer and all of our neighbors. And so we started a program called Low Input Viticulture and Enology, LIVE. And that's really, it's beyond organic, because what it does is it takes the whole farm into consideration and all the practices we're engaged in. Suzanne talked a little bit about some of these techniques. One of the things we do, of course, is we use riparian areas to generate beneficial insects and other forms of wildlife that create balance in the vineyard. So you're not having to use pesticides and herbicides to care for the vines. It's done naturally. That's just one example. This is a third-party certification program. That means the consumer can rely on what the producer and the grower is telling them about what our conduct is. Now, salmon safe, this is a term that's used in conjunction with LIVE, and that's because the Pacific Rivers Council ran a consumer education program around this practice. And it really is, just as Suzanne stated, we're doing everything we can to make sure we're not putting anything in the groundwater that ends up in our streams, in our rivers, and in our salmon. Although, as you probably know, there's one place where the salmon aren't safe from us.
Which is, no, I don't. Tell me.
Well, that's with our Pinot Noir.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yes, because you have to eat salmon with your Pinot Noir. I got it now. I know this. I have to eat this.
Yeah, people scratch their heads over it now.
No, I got it. I finally got it. Okay, finally got it. Yes, yes. I've been to a few Oregon Pinot festivals where large swaths of salmon are consumed. So absolutely. So I know you do a lot of sustainability efforts there. One thing that, and I know that Suzanne was talking a little about water recycling, but you also have something with catchment ponds.
You know, just as Suzanne described, many Oregon winemakers are using methods by which they treat the water so that when the water is put back onto the ground, it is perfectly safe. But in this particular case, this is talking about how do we look after our vines without taking water out of the ground and without taking water out of our streams, because when our streams need the water flow in the summer, the fish need the water flow. So what we do is we have built a catchment pond, and with a very large apron that goes up the hill, and it collects the rainwater when rainwater is wasted in the winter. And we collect this water and then we use it to drip irrigate our vines in the summer. So it's a completely closed system. And we're now teaching other farmers how this is really a very low-tech solution to the water problems that we have.
Yeah, and the water problems are only going to get worse. So hopefully this is something low-tech that kind of can continue on. And then the more innovative thing you're doing has to do with UVC light. And you told me about this. So can you touch on that a little bit for
Gwendolyn? Here's probably what a lot of your viewers don't know, and that is that American farmers put over 100 million pounds of fungicides on what they're growing each year. Now think about that. And we're learning more about what fungicides do to people and other life. And so what we've done is we have worked with the Cornell University, David Godori, the Oregon State University, USDA, and Washington State University to experiment with applying UVC light to control powdery mildew, which is the #1 agricultural problem we face as growers in spoiling our fruit. And what UVC light does when applied at night, at slow speeds, is it kills powdery mildew because their defense mechanism has turned off at night. And so we utilized the very first autonomous electric robot in our vineyards to apply UVC light to eliminate even the need for ourselves, which is organic sulfur in controlling powdery mildew.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is why I'm going to keep encouraging, like my daughter had a science test. I'm like, no, this is important. This will be our future, right? This is so much of what y'all are applying has to do with, eating the bad bacteria in water and using the light. This is great.
Now, imagine if we're able to prove this technology and make it possible and efficient for farmers. It will revolutionize agriculture because UVC light is fully sustainable. It produces no externalities, no harm.
That's fantastic. And cork. So you're using cork. So tell me about choosing that, and you kind of expanded upon it from a conservation and recycling perspective for cork as well, right?
Yes, I mean, as winemakers, Suzanne touched on it, I'm sure John will as well. As winemakers, high quality natural cork is the absolute best enclosure for wine. You get about a high quality natural cork will release about 1 milligram of oxygen into a bottle of wine a year, which is just the amount of wine that wine needs to properly age and develop into that beautiful velvet, silky wine that you want over time. And there's no other enclosure that does the job that natural cork does as a winemaker. But here's the other thing. The other thing is that the plastic corks and aluminum screw caps actually produce a lot of negative environmental consequences to the planet. And as a result of consumers going to them because they're much cheaper to use and sometimes more convenient, it's putting pressure on these 6 million acres of cork forests in the Mediterranean, in Portugal, Spain, and North Africa. And it's causing them to lose their economic viability. And which means that other forms of wildlife are losing its habitat as well. So these trees, as you've already stated, suck up carbon, they pump out oxygen. Plastic and aluminum doesn't do that.
Yeah. No, I think I'm going to totally invest in cork floors as well after this. So yeah, I had no idea how much it actually absorbed, which is wonderful. So, and you have a recycling program, which you've been working with grocers for
Yes.
people to bring in their corks, and they get ground up to make all these things, right?
Yes, we started a program called Cork Reharvest, and we have these collection boxes in retailers, and we figured out a way to get the collection boxes back using our distribution system of our wine distributors, so there's no additional carbon footprint in recovering the cork. And then this cork is then ground up and used for other purposes. In fact, at Western Pulp here in Oregon, Corvallis, it's ground up and put with pulp, and it makes the shippers for our wine boxes.
Like full circle. Yeah, and if you are a Wine.com customer, you will notice in November you might be getting little sacks, recyclable sacks, to put a number of your corks in to then mail back to Recork, which will then be reused. So I love that. So I want to taste your Pinot Noir because I love it and I'm thirsty. So taste this wine, just kind of talk us through the flavor profile and maybe also kind of down the road how that cork and how it will age in the cellar.
Wine.com carries many excellent Oregon Pinot Noirs, and I recommend them. So your viewers don't have to choose this wine to really enjoy a great Willamette Valley appellated Pinot Noir. But this is a classic. What you have in your hand, what you're putting up to your nose, is a classic example of how Pinot Noir in the cool climate of the Willamette Valley will develop and produce these beautiful aromatics, floral aromatics, and rose petal notes, and raspberry and blackberry. And then when you taste it, of course, you get, that you pick up what we really excel at, and that is that forest floor, that earthy, the earthy notes in the wine, and sometimes even a little bit of mushroom. And so when you close your eyes, when you taste this wine, you transport yourself into the Willamette Valley, and you're standing there at the top of our vineyard next to a large stand of Douglas fir tree.
Exactly. And then you want to go truffle hunting, right? Just kidding. But this is a beautiful wine. Yeah, it marries that wonderful fruit, kind of the brighter fruit, the floral with that kind of savory, really just that savory, like you said, the forest floor, but also that mushroom and dried leaves. Gwendolyn,
the best way that your viewers can get the most out of the wine that they buy through Wine.com, and especially Oregon Pinot Noirs, is to choose wines that are closed with high quality natural cork, because it's over time that you really get the benefit of the development of the wine in the bottle, whereas you just cannot get that with other forms of enclosures. And what would you say for putting this wine down? I know you have other higher tier, but like more in single vineyard wines and things like that. But kind of what would you recommend for having somebody let this evolve, and what should they expect? I think people should get enough of the wine so that they can pull out a bottle every 6 months or every year and see how it's developing over 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Mhm.
But well-made Oregon Pinot Noirs, because of our cool climate, have actually fairly low pH levels, which means that there's a lot of acidity in the wine. And the acidity in the wine, those are your soldiers. They go after those oxygen molecules that want to go after the fruit. And those soldiers will protect that wine over the long term and allow it to really develop into the great wine you want to enjoy.
Yeah. Well, it also is already a great wine that I want to enjoy. But yes, I can see it evolving over the years as well. Thank you so much, Jim. Beautiful.
Cheers.
So we are moving on to Ridge Vineyards. Hello, John. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So Ridge is located both in Santa Cruz, south of the Bay Area, but also in Sonoma, north of the Bay Area. And you've done so much to kind of take a path in going towards organic viticulture. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey and why it's important for you?
Sure. So yeah, Ridge was founded in 1962, and our original winery, which is still there today, is in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And then during the 1960s and 70s, as Ridge branched out and looked around California, they found a lot of old vine Zinfandel vineyards. And in over the years, we sort of consolidated those vineyards, those Zinfandel vineyards in Sonoma County. And in the year 2000, we built the winery that you see there. And
this is Lytton. Sorry, this is Lytton Springs, right?
This is Lytton Springs. Yes, so this is up in Sonoma.
In Sonoma, okay.
Correct. And as we took on more and more farming our own vineyards, we started asking ourselves the question. I mean, wine is a natural product. It's made from grapes. It grows on a vine, and really, we sort of said, well, it's really in our interest to take care of the environment as much as possible. What we give it gives back to us. And at the time, the biggest challenges we were having were with weeds. So we were using herbicides and with certain pests. And there's a lot of there's been a lot of debate about glyphosate, for example. Is it safe? Is it not safe? But when we looked at it, it seems pretty clear. You put it on the ground, and its purpose, and it's very effective. It kills what it touches. And there's probably a lot of things as well that we can't see. That's part of the microflora in the soil that it's damaging as well. And then on top of it, we really asked ourselves. We're also asking our workers to be handling this. So that really got us asking a lot of hard questions, and we really said, what's the best way to just factor all of those negative possibilities out? And we just stopped using it. And the transition really, in the end, wasn't as hard as we really thought it would be. And then another one that was interesting is that, especially with Zinfandel, there's little spider mites that just seem to love getting into Zinfandel leaves and turning them orange and really ruining a vineyard manager's day. And in the 70s and even into the 80s, there were pesticides that were actually pretty powerful agents. And but even then, you would find you would run into the whole problem where you would get the spider mites that were then immune to it, and the problem kept going on. And we finally did a trial with with natural predators, these little thrips that you just put out, and the success. I mean, it was we had twice the success we were having with the pesticide. So it was really, it was a no-brainer. But again, I think that it's on just in the global sense, it makes so much sense for us to take care of the environment.
It's better for the wine, it's better for the environment, and we certainly need that now. Tell us a little bit about that new winery, the Lytton Springs Winery, building that, and kind of how you incorporated the environment into building it.
Sure. So in 1972 is really when Ridge came up to Sonoma County, and it was the vineyard, which is be the wine we're tasting today, the Lytton Springs Vineyard, just north of the town of Healdsburg, that Ridge purchased. And we finally decided, let's build a winery that's just dedicated to producing Zinfandels. So in 2000 we broke ground on a winery. And again, we asked ourselves the question, what kind of a winery do we want to build? What do we want to use? And we said, we want to do something sustainable. And after a lot of research, we finally decided to build a straw bale winery. And straw obviously is a renewable resource. It's natural, and it has a very high insulation value. So it has an R50 insulation value, which it makes up, there's about 3,000 straw bales that are in the walls of the winery. And it allows us to really minimize the amount of cooling that we need to use, because the cool air from the evening comes in, vents close in the morning, and it really locks in that coolness with that high insulation value. And then on the roof, we also installed, on the south-facing roof, we installed solar panels. So we have just over a 60 kW system, which provides over 60% of our electricity needs over the course of the year.
That's fantastic. I love this, because when I heard about straw, it was when I read The Three Little Pigs, and it was never a good idea. So
Right.
I love that you're building a winery out of straw, and it's so successful. It's just really exciting. I think that's great. I love all this kind of technology, but like also going back to the basics of what we have here on Earth that we can use to build and grow. So let's taste through this wine. This is the Lytton Springs. So I know it's a blend primarily of Zinfandel, like you said with Zinfandel, but tell us a little bit about what else is in the wine.
Sure. So this is the 19 Lytton Springs, and it is what's interesting about the wine. These come from Old Vines Vineyards that were planted over 100 years ago, and the way they were planting vineyards at that time was a little different than how we usually do it today, which is that instead of just planting one single grape varietal, they would plant a number of different grape varietals side by side in certain proportions that sort of complement each other. So in this case,
field blends, right?
A field blend, exactly. So in this case, this is a little over 70% Zinfandel with about 15% Petit Syrah, and then almost 10% Carignan. And what seems so uncanny to me, I mean, it's such the way that they play off of each other. I mean, Zinfandel really brings in this raspberry fruit that's kind of its calling card, but then you've got that sort of dark feature, the tannin, the richness, the structure coming in from the Petit Syrah. And then, the Carignan is really important too, because like Jim was mentioning, I mean, the acidity in a wine is really, it really can drive so much of the flavor and also its ageability. And Carignan brings this nice, bright acidity to kind of round out the wine.
Yeah, it's a beautiful nose. Yeah, I know. I love Jim's like the acidity is your soldiers. I mean, those are the ones that are going to keep going. They're going to march on through, which I love that analogy.
Sometimes called glue that holds the wine together.
The glue, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are a ton of. We're always stealing people's analogies to throw back out there, right? But yeah, this is a beautiful aroma. It has that Zinfandel, but it also has just other layers. I mean, that's one thing I've noticed about all of these wines is that you keep wanting to smell them. Or Suzanne, what was your term again? Drinkalada or sipalada?
Moorish. You want to
Moorish.
drink
Moorish. Yes, all these wines are Moorish. I love that. So, learning so many new phrases. So Ridge, I have had the privilege of having Ridge wines many years down the road, Montebello, Lytton Springs. So tell us a little bit about how these wines can age, and also how cork plays a role in that, and why you choose cork.
Sure. So, between Old Vines, Zinfandel Vineyards, and then of course our Montebello, which is our Bordeaux blend, Ridge has always always been after, trying to make wines that are ageable. Even our Zinfandel as a varietal is usually something to drink up in the first 4 or 5 years, but from the right sites, and especially with these field blends, the Lytton Springs, our Geyserville, are wines that'll age easily for 20 years. And then, of course, with the Montebello is a wine that'll, in any vintage, will age for 30 or up to 40 years. So, cork really is, it's just the best. There really isn't anything out there that I think rivals it in terms of its effectiveness. And then also, for long-term aging and just allowing that little bit of breathability. And then, of course, it's natural. I mean, I in some ways, I kind of turn the question on its head. Why do you use cork? Why wouldn't we use cork? I mean, we're making a natural product. We're farming organically. We're not putting any synthetic additives in the wine during the process, on and on. And then you get to the very, very last point. The last thing you do is put something other than the bark of a tree. Why wouldn't you choose that?
Yeah. No, I get that. So it was a beautiful wine. What for this one, I know Montebello can go like 40 years. You said Lytton Springs can be 10, 15. I feel like it could just linger a little bit.
Yeah, or up to 20. Yeah, we certainly opened up older ones.
Yeah. Beautiful wines. So thank you so much, John. And thank you all for sharing these stories and your dedication to your wine, as well as obviously the environment, so that we can all taste these again in 50 years if we're still around. For those tasting at home, I was hoping that you could each speak a little bit, and you have a little bit already, but also just, the importance of consumers choosing wines from wineries, dedicated to sustainability and just the ongoing sustainability, especially, and how one might kind of become a more sustainable drinker. What are some tips for that? And Suzanne, do you want to start with that?
Gosh, pull the cork.
Yeah.
I think it's increasingly common for folks to use some sort of indication on the label and the packaging. I don't. We use it in our marketing materials, where we talk about how we farm, sustainable, fish-friendly, bee-friendly, all of the techniques that we use. We absolutely live that in, but they can come to our website and find out more about our farming techniques. But there are definitely some of my neighbors and friends I've noticed using, organic grapes used in making this wine. It doesn't mean that the wine itself is, 100% certified organic, because of course that's a little bit more of a daunting process, but there is some indication, and you can always find, everybody's just their cell phone away, right, from finding out about our farming techniques. I think, Jim hit about this, both John and Jim talked about this, that growing wine is incredibly natural. It is, a process where, it's been done for millennia, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not a kind of farming where we're using a lot of chemicals already, or, water, strawberries, lettuces, all of these things, unless grown organically, they have much more complicated techniques. Growing wine, these vines, they have very deep root structures. There are some parts of our vineyard where it's 25 feet deep. They source all the nutrients they need. We can almost dry farm our vineyards, and some of my neighbors do 100% dry farm depending on their site. And choosing wine over choosing a hard seltzer. Yeah, this is a much more, you're already 20 steps ahead, my friends, by just choosing wine. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. So yeah, and we are very close to kind of understanding and researching and things like that. So Jim, what about you? Any thoughts on?
Gwendolyn, I absolutely just love this program today. This has been a lot of fun. The nursery is the number one agricultural crop in Oregon, but the number two agricultural crop in Oregon is hay and straw. And so I'm thinking John is onto something. Yeah. If it's got a 50 R value, we need to start selling a lot of straw that we produce in Oregon. And you heard from Suzanne a really important statistic your viewers, your customers should know. And that is that when you buy a high quality cork, she's paying, and we're all paying, between 40 cents upwards over $2 for those punched corks, right? The corks that are punched out of the bark.
Oh, yeah, visuals. That's amazing. Look at your visuals.
Yeah, so this is a punched cork. These are expensive when you have these high quality corks. Well, what really your viewers need to know is that the people who are using aluminum screw caps are saving a lot of money. It's like less than 17 cents a closure, and plastic is even cheaper. But the problem is the externalities to all the rest of us, to the planet, that they're costing. So really the cost is higher. So if you actually added it all up? And so really what consumers can do is one of the easiest, cheapest things they can do is to buy themselves a corkscrew and to protect our planet and combat global warming by using products that are grown sustainably and packaged sustainably. So that's my message. I believe that consumers can change the world. If consumers say, look, we're going to buy products that have these certifications, like Live or the programs that John and Suzanne are participating in, and behave in this way, we consumers will change the world and do it rapidly.
That is fantastic. I love that message. John, what about you on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's true that it would be great if we could, if you could just walk up, you look at a label, and just like that, if it's made from organic grapes or sustainably. But I do think that just choosing wines that are finished with a cork is the first good step, because at a minimum that whoever made that wine has made a choice, like Jim said, to use something that's more expensive, which is obviously not only is it not harmful to the environment, but it actually sequesters carbon. So it's definitely one sign and something to look for.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much for being here and sharing your wines and telling your stories. We're grateful for all that you do to make fantastic wines, but also to promote sustainability in the wine industry through the vineyards, through the packaging. So we'll hope you to continue to kind of lead the way here. And thanks to those of you at home. And if you haven't had a chance yet, this trio is still available on Wine.com. Remember, you as consumers can change the world. So we encourage you to continue to do so and buy that way. But thank you again so much, Suzanne, Jim, and Michael. Beautiful wines, great conversation. Appreciate your time.
Cheers.
Cheers, Gwendolyn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.